Exophobia is a retro-inspired first-person shooter that on the surface probably looks like games you've played before. And while it does draw inspiration from all-time greats like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, the way it presents its progression and combat is actually quite a bit different. But before we dive into the full review, if you're new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it, and it would help me reach my current goal of 1,000 subscribers. The story in Exophobia is pretty simple. You wake up in a spaceship that has been overrun by hostile alien soldiers. You're obviously alone and need to battle your way through in order to escape with your life. That's the gist of it, and you'll learn more through the save terminal by pouring through the data available to you as you acquire collectible CDs found scattered throughout the spaceship. The idea is for you to feel alone, and the gameplay definitely made me feel that way as I played through it. Exophobia is a game that you will spend the bulk majority of your playtime engaging in combat and also exploring its different floors. This differs from a lot of retro-inspired first-person shooters in that it isn't divided up into levels like Doom or Quake, but instead treats its world more akin to what you would find in a Metroidvania. There's different floors you can travel to that serve as separate areas or biomes if you want to call them that, but you'll be exploring it freely without too much guidance. That means backtracking will also be something you should expect, since your progression is tied to upgrades for your main weapon and they'll be required to enter certain areas. You also won't find yourself wielding a whole arsenal of cool weapons, but instead will only have your one gun and the associated upgrades you've acquired at your disposal. If you're not the type of player that likes to figure things out for yourself or gets frustrated by feeling lost, then Exophobia is most likely not going to be for you, since I felt lost and slightly annoyed on at least a few different occasions. You also shouldn't expect to mow down hordes and hordes of enemies at each turn. Eliminating enemies means they'll stay permanently dead unless it's a situation where there's something spawning enemies you need to destroy. Returning to previously visited areas can feel a bit empty at times as a result, but it also eliminates the need for care and allows you to just breeze on through to reach your next destination quickly. Well, quickly if you know where your next destination is, of course. There's plenty of secrets to be found for those with not just a keen eye, but also quick reflexes. These will often be health refills, armor pickups, possibly even a permanent health upgrade to increase your survivability, and who knows, you might even find a Easter egg or two in there. Oftentimes you'll do things like pushing a switch that works on a timer, and then you need to hightail it through a door before it closes to collect your prize. I would describe the gameplay of Exophobia to be a bit more methodical than mindless like some retro shooters of the past. Boss fights will often require you to utilize your abilities to find a weakness to exploit in order to be victorious. There's also times where this applies to regular enemies as well, since some of them have certain weaknesses. You might need to Mega Man slide into an enemy first in order to create an opening, or maybe you might require a certain upgrade to your gun like the Charge Shot or Shockwave upgrade in order to dispatch a particular foe. There's a decent bit of variety here that keeps the combat feeling interesting throughout. It also felt incredibly satisfying to dispatch foes at times, as some sections can be fairly difficult. Death respawns you at the last used save point, so make sure to save often to avoid losing any progress. A few of the boss fights are difficult at first, as you do your best to figure out the solution to the problem at hand. Brute force isn't going to get you very far in Exophobia, so be prepared to put on your thinking cap in order to figure out the many nuances to its puzzles, navigation, and combat. A key component to Exophobia that I haven't touched on yet is the atmosphere. For a game consisting of pixel art, It does a great job of conveying a certain feeling to the player, whether that's a tense feeling as you traverse through tight corridors, or something more akin to dread as you trudge through deep waters seeking a way out. I don't know that I've ever played a pixel game that made me feel these emotions the same way a AAA game might, so Exophobia might be the first. A huge component of this that simply cannot be overstated is how much the music and sound design contributes to this. The music can feel brooding and atmospheric one moment, and then energetic to pump you up during combat the next. I hope those clips got my point across, because this small aspect of the game made a big difference to me, and I really wanted to emphasize it. So bravo to the developer for nailing it. As you play through the game, you can unlock in-game achievements. Yes, even on Nintendo Switch, there's at least 2 possible endings from what I can tell, and rewards associated with those. So there's a decent bit of content here to keep you busy for at least several hours. Your mileage may vary greatly though, since progression is handled in a fairly cryptic manner. The last thing I want to mention before I get into some of my gripes with the game are the available customization options and why you should take a look here when you first start playing. By default, there's no crosshair to give you a visual indicator of where you're aiming. When I played with it off, my shots just didn't feel like they were landing where I thought they should, so I highly recommend toggling on a crosshair to assist in hitting your shots. Also, I played this on Nintendo Switch, so maybe this is a controller thing, but the default sensitivity felt stupidly high. I play my fair share of shooters, and this by default felt really difficult to control. So a large chunk of players should expect to have to tweak this to hit their sweet spot. You can also find a nice batch of other options to tailor the experience to your tastes. Things like being able to turn off screen shake or disable blood if you want. As you play through the game, you can unlock new color palettes as well if you want to get a bit wacky with it in regards to the visuals. So now that leads us to my gripes. My main one is that I really didn't love the Metroidvania style progression, since it can be a bit confusing to navigate the spaceship. I often had to check each floor every time I acquired a new upgrade in order to find my next destination. There are hints to be found, so definitely make sure to read the logs you unlock from the CDs if you decide to play this. But overall, it was a bit too cryptic for my tastes. Also, some of the time sections where you pull a lever to open a door, the levers are at times really far from their intended destination. For things like this, having the camera pan to show you what door opened the first time you pull a lever would have been a clever solution. I often had to pull a lever and run around to each closed door in the area to finally find the one I was intended to rush to. It felt a bit excessive and unnecessary. A bit into the game, you'll have to slide kick some explosive barrels in order to blow up some doors. Kicking the barrels was pretty wonky. I would either slide through it, or it wouldn't quite go where I felt like it should. This concept was a nice way to utilize the slide kick for some puzzle solving, but I think its implementation left a bit to be desired. Lastly, the bosses can feel like a bit of a difficulty spike at times. This makes them extremely satisfying to overcome, but also a bit frustrating as well. I also want to mention there are different difficulty options, so while I played on the default, which is normal, you can turn it down to easy, or ramp it up even higher if you fancy yourself a masochist. So to write the closing chapter on this sci-fi shooter, did I enjoy it? Yeah, I did, but the issues I outlined did hinder my enjoyment a bit. I recommend it for players that like the concept of it being non-linear and more of a cerebral shooter, but I don't recommend it for those just seeking something mindless, where you go from point A to point B, eliminating enemies and maybe collecting a few keycards along the way, because it's definitely not that. It was very different than games I've played in this style in the past, and I enjoyed it for that. If you want to know about any potential issues like frame rate dips or crashes, I'm pleased to report that I ran into no issues while playing the Nintendo Switch version with the console docked. A special thanks to PM Studios so that I can make this review on Exophobia. I appreciate you watching this video through to the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and also let me know in the comments if you plan on picking this up, or if you have any questions, and I'll be sure to get back to you. But until next time, have a good one.